Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Game Makers Guild. My name is Tim Blank. I am the president, and I am joined here with some absolutely amazing guests as we talk about best practices for working with board game media. So let's introduce our guests right away. First off, we have the super handsome Rob Kalajian of A Pawn's Perspective. How's it going, Rob?
Good. You flatter me so much with that comment. That was totally non-scripted or requested by myself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm just calling the shots as I see them, Rob. We have the also super handsome Ryan Schoon of Man vs. Meeple. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going great, Tim. Glad to be here.
Thanks. I'm glad that you're here as well. But then we have the most handsomest, Anitra and Andrew Smith from the Family Gamers. How's it going, Anitra and Andrew?
Hi, thanks so much for having us on.
We have an unfair advantage. There's two of us, which is why we're twice as handsome. But normally we would be equally handsome.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. This guy, every week when we do our podcast, he says, my lovely and wonderful wife, Anitra.
I mean, is she not lovely and wonderful?
Then,
hold on.
And then I'm committed to saying that's me.
Yeah. All good.
All right, so we are here to talk, like I said, about best practices for designers and publishers when working with board game media. And I've done a little bit of an intro, but I want to give you all a little bit of time to just tell us about yourself and your experience as board game media or board game reviewer. So Anitra and Andrew, why don't you start?
All right. So we are the Family Gamers. We have been reviewing and podcasting about games for almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years.
Now?
It's been a while.
Yeah, and so
you can tell by that awesome microphone.
Yeah, when we started this thing, our youngest was basically a newborn. Now he's 6, and our oldest is 12. So we have very much spanned the gamut on the games that we play. Our focus is obviously primarily on family games, but really it's about games that you can play as a family. So that might be a hobby game that is actually good, because as we all know, hobby games are both games for kids and also drinking games. It might also be a more complicated game that scales well or can accept rule shifting well, that you can play it with your kids, or you can just play it across an age range. And range in games is super important when you talk about stuff like this. So yeah, we cover family games, but family games doesn't mean that we only cover things by, Peaceable Kingdoms and Haba, or Game Right or something like that. So we really do try to cover an awful lot of stuff.
yeah, games you can play with your kids, and also games you can play with your parents or grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And just to clarify, you said hobby games are drinking games and games you can play with your kids, but they should not be drinking games that you play with your kids. Okay,
correct.
Okay.
That is correct. They can be either or. We don't recommend putting them together, but I've had many conversations with T and Haba about playing Haba games as drinking games. So it's not just us.
The sillier the better.
Yes.
Honestly.
Jeff says you can do it with root beer. So
You can.
There you go.
Root beer. Thank you, Jeff.
we do not encourage you to play drinking games with your kids. Yeah, so,
No.
Ryan.
Although our tagline is play games with your kids. So.
Well, yeah. So Ryan, let's move on to you. You are with Man vs. Meeple, but I know you do 100,000 other things in the board game.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I do everything that I can do. I mean, a little bit of game design, a little bit of role-playing game design. I work part-time for GameFound, which is a pledge manager / crowdfunding platform. But Man vs. Meeple, or MVM, has been a passion of mine for a long time. We started the channel back in 2016, and at the time I was really just a behind the scenes figure. I was there to play games. I was there to help maybe some of the technical stuff, and then the channel kind of started to grow and we started to do more content. And I think it was maybe 2018 when we started our Chit Chat program, which is a kind of a weekly talk show thing that we do on YouTube, and that I think has become maybe our most watched program. I mean, we have a lot of people that tune in every week to watch that Chit Chat. And over the course of the last year during the pandemic, we've been doing it virtually and we've been doing it live, so that we've kind of been able to build a community around that. We have a lot of the same people that show up every week to be in the comments and just kind of interact with us. And we use that platform to shine a light on things in the industry that we really like. We've used it to do some of our top 10 lists and some of our favorite things, and also to talk about some of the struggles that have been happening in the industry over the past year. So it's been quite the ride. I don't think none of us really expected this pandemic to be still going on, but we're committed and we're still doing that amongst all of our other content, which is reviews and how to play videos and previews, overviews, first looks, tons of content on our channel. Just look up Man vs. Meeple and you will find it all on YouTube.
So when I said you do everything in the industry, I was talking about more than just Man versus Meeple. But when it comes to just Man versus Meeple, you still do everything in the industry.
Yes. That's how things are for I think a lot of people that work in the industry, even like is designers, board game like play testers, artists. A lot of them also do content creation because we obviously are here because we have a passion for board games, and so we want to talk about them.
Yeah, and I could imagine too that it's also helpful to be in other aspects of the industry as you're producing media about it, because you can kind of talk the talk with designers and you really have a better understanding of what a design mind looks like if you yourself have one.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Right, and last but not least, Rob, Pawn's Perspective. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your site.
Yep. So I run Upon's Perspective, which started off as a review site. I've actually been writing in the industry now for a little over 12 years. I used to write for a site called Purple Pawn, which was news and sometimes reviews, and kind of meeting people as I got out there in conventions and getting more and more review stuff. I ended up kind of spinning up Upon's Perspective to be a review site, and it's kind of grown from there. So I do tabletop reviews, I do gaming articles, I do videos for RPG accessories, I do some video game live streaming, and thanks to the pandemic, I am now also a full-time freelance writer and content creator. So I've picked up some projects writing for some RPGs and other such content like that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for coming on in and sharing all of this with us, Rob. I know I've written for Upon's Perspective like once or twice as well. So
That's right.
Yeah, you've got some really great content up there because I wrote it. So and also the stuff you wrote is pretty good too.
Oh,
So.
Oh man.
Wow.
ouch.
All right, so our first question that we have is it's a question that was asked before the whole panel started. But when you're doing your reviews, we really just want to know, what are you looking for? And we're not talking specifically about the types of games that you're looking for, like the category. Like obviously, Anitra and Andrew, you're going to be looking for family games. But I want you to delve a little bit deeper here. What are you looking for in a family game when you decide that you're going to do a review for it?
Well, these days, we generally are looking for games that are available at retail or about to be available at retail. A lot of our audience is not hardcore gamers. They're not big Kickstarter backers. And because we do family games, unfortunately, a lot of times Kickstarter takes a year or 2 years to fulfill. And if you're buying a game to play with your kids, that's too long, and stuff may have, your kids' interest may have changed by then.
I know that we're talking, especially with regard to the Game Makers Guild, in the context of smaller game designers. One of the things that's really important is that game designers have a plan for their game, in the sense that, if a game's going to Kickstarter, that's okay. What are you going to do next? Let's assume the game funds, right? I mean, that's what everybody's assuming, right? Or if it's on GameFound or wherever it is. Cool. What's the next step? Are you going to look to put this into a retail distribution channel? Or are you just happy with what you do, happy with what you get? I'll give you a perfect example, which is a game that went live on Kickstarter today called Core Quest. This game, super adorable. This was a project that was just dad and his daughter. And they're at 300% funding. I think probably in large part because Dan Hughes is part of the Dice Tower, so he has great exposure. And it's also a phenomenal game. But their plan after Kickstarter is really, they don't really have one, because this was really designed not to become a retail product, but to be a COVID project that they want to share with the world. So, we had Dan on our show and we talked about the game and how interesting and fun and unique it was and all this other stuff. But we're not going to write a formal review for a game like that because it's never going to be available at retail. And so what that plan is really does affect whether or not it's something that we want to bring to our site in any kind of content that has permanence, something that we're going to write about or an actual review that we're going to record. So that is something that's really important when we look at this. And, this is for us all about the demographic that we specifically target, right? The fact of the matter is that there is nobody that goes to the Family Gamers that is interested in Tainted Grail, right? Like that's just not a game that our people are going to care about. They're not going to care about Gloomhaven either, but they might like Gloomhaven and wish they had a Gloomhaven type thing for their kids. And so those are the kind of things that we're going to look for, is stuff that very specifically appeals to our demographic. Mm-hmm. And our demographic isn't necessarily the games that are our favorites. Like my favorite games are down here. They're not really family games, right? Like they're just too complex for that. And so when we look at stuff for our site, it's stuff that either is already at retail or has a plan for getting to retail. Those are super important parts for us.
Would you say that that's because of your audience? Your audience
Absolutely.
Wants to read about the game and then be able to immediately buy it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
Our audience is two types of parents for the most part. One of them is gamers who have kids and they're like, oh crap, what do I do now? and so they've already got, they've got that gamer mindset, but they're like, well, what? I mean, I can't.
They might be like, I hear HABA games are good,
right,
but I have a 2-year-old. Exactly. Where do I start?
And the other ones are, generally speaking, parents who are sick of their kids playing video games, and they're like, I need some board games. I want to get them to the table so, we can interact in some kind of way. Like, what games can I get?
They're looking for something more than just Monopoly and Uno, but they're not really sure where to start.
Right. And we've done entire shows that are just, these are some actually good games that you can buy at Target. Right. And that was before Target actually had good games. So it's a little bit more difficult. but that, I mean, it's totally driven by our demographic. It's just the way it is. There's a question in the chat that says, will your demographic remain the same even though your own children will be outgrowing it? The answer is complicated. It's yes and it's no. So we are the core of the Family Gamers, but we have a lot more writers. We have writers who have kids as young as about 3 and writers who have kids as old as 17 that write for Family Gamers. And so when we get interest from a publisher or whatever, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these kinds of things later, that does drive some of our decisions on who's going to write what, right? So we absolutely want to keep in mind where we came from. And because we've got so much experience at this point with those games, we can look at a game analytically, even if our kids aren't the ones that are playing it. Right. So
right. I'm sure it does help, though, to have the input of someone that's of the age group that the game is for them.
Oh yes, very
absolutely.
much.
I mean, we're very blessed that we have a strong church community. Obviously, with COVID, that's not really something that is terribly available with regards to playing with other people's kids, but we have that avenue open to us. So we
have access to young children.
We have access to the children, and better yet, we can
again no drinking games.
No drinking games. Definitely not at the church. But we can give the kids back when they smell bad, which is perfect.
Yeah. How about you, Rob? When you are looking at games that you want to do a review of, I know you do some family games and you do some gamer games. What kind of games is it that you're looking for?
So kind of throughout Upon's Perspectives history, and it's changed now and then, but really what it comes down to is I like to look at games that I'm interested in, games that jump out at me. I love thematic games. I love games with great artwork. I like game that just looks really cool. I gave the example of Tidal Blades when it came to Kickstarter. I mean, it's an amazing looking game with this rich world and colorful artwork. And I was all in on that before I knew anything about how it played. So I look for games that have a personal interest to me. And I've tried kind of branching out from that and bitten off more than I can chew many, many times throughout the years. But I look for something that interests me, and so I can share that with people who say, hey, this guy has similar interests to me. What does he think of this? And when I'm looking at games, I look at the the three P's from a pun's perspective is the play, the presentation, and the plan. So how does it play? How does it look? And how well is the rule book written? But yeah, it all comes down to kind of the wow factor of the game. Is it unique? Does it look really nice? Is it professionally made? And I used to do a lot of Kickstarter stuff because there was so much cool stuff coming out at the time or all the time. And I had to stop doing that and kind of sit back and look at finished products. But yes, something in there has to wow me. And it doesn't have to be all three things. It could be an extremely well-written rule book that I'm like, wow, this sounds awesome. Or a game that I sit down and play and it's like, okay, this is awesome. Or a game that just looks really cool. Any one of those three things is enough for me to want to pull something onto the site.
It makes sense too. As media, you want to give the hook to your audience and get them hooked on the game as well if it's a good game that you enjoy.
Yeah, and I've been accused over the years of being a little bit too positive with my reviews, but that is mostly because I am looking for things that interest me. If I see something that doesn't look like I'm going to like it, I don't really want to review it. It's not to say that I haven't given some pretty bad reviews for games that I thought I might really like, and man, they were bad. But I tend to give more favorable reviews because I am looking for things that I feel I'm going to enjoy.
And Ryan, I'm going to throw the question on over to you now. Tell us about some of the games that you choose to talk about on MVM.
Yeah, I think Andrew, Anita, and Rob have all kind of nailed the idea of you're speaking to a demographic. Every one of our channels has a demographic. People come to that channel for different things. I know at MVM, we get a lot of people that are very much into the hobby that are more on the Euro side of like medium to heavy Euro games. And so if you look at a lot of the reviews that we've done, it's games like, Maracaibo, things like that are like big Euro games. We have a lot of fans of like Feld and, all of those classics. So picking a game that's completely out of your wheelhouse, like we've never really reviewed a miniatures game, for example, and we don't really do role-playing game reviews because people don't generally come to our channel for that. But we're at a point now where we have grown so much that we have quite a varied amount. So we'll still do things like, lighter games or kids games, or, the Tiny Epic series that we've posted some stuff about. And I think it's all about finding the format that fits your game. There is one thing when it comes to doing reviews, and I don't know about everybody else, but we get asked that a lot. We'll be asked if we could review a prototype. And for everyone out there that's a game designer, budding game designer, that is something that we don't like to do. Like, I will talk about your prototype. I will champion your prototype if I love it. I will gladly do a live stream playthrough. But when it comes to a review, because like prototypes can change so much from the time that we get our hands on it to the time it actually releases. I think it was Andrew who pointed out that Kickstarter games can take 2 years to actually deliver. And in that time period, the games can change so much that looking at a game and saying, yeah, this game is really great, and then having it come out and not be great. Or what actually ends up happening a lot is we might play a prototype that we don't like or that I don't like, but then by the time the game actually comes out, it's gone through so much development and they've made so many changes that it's almost a completely different game. And so when you are a small publisher, I know it's very tempting to want somebody to do a review, like give their honest opinion on your game. And I think there's room for that, but just understand that we can't really like give a firm review on something that isn't complete. And I think that's one thing I really like to see I really like to see a final product, what it's going to look like, feel like, because all of that matters to me when I'm choosing a game to review. And I, like Rob said, we review games that we like, but we also review games that look good. I think Tidal Blades is a great example for that. I think everyone is interested in Tidal Blades just because they look at it and they say, this game looks absolutely amazing. It doesn't matter if it's your type of game or not. You just want to know more. You want to talk about it. And honestly, and I hate to say this because you shouldn't judge a book by your cover, but it has to happen all the time. So if a game shows up, so sometimes at MVM, we'll get games from publishers and they might send us a box of games and we'll look through and it's like, okay, well, here's one that just really looks good. The cover looks great. The components look great. The rule book, like Rob said, is well thought out and easy to understand. We're going to be drawn to that game naturally. And it doesn't matter if maybe the greatest game of the decade is buried in there in a brown box with no artwork. Like that, it's going to be longer before we get to that game. I think we all have a little bit of bias when it comes to wanting to play something that just like a theme that appeals to us or a game that just looks really, really, really good. So just keep that in mind. I know that art is not always the most important part of a game, but you need something that's going to grab people's attention. And that is true for reviewers. We can't review everything. So give us something that really pops. Or if you know that it doesn't hurt to lay out the groundwork and have a conversation and hype up your game. If I get a game that I'm like, this game doesn't look like it appeals to me, but yet everyone on Facebook is talking about it, I am definitely going to check that game out. And it might end up being my new favorite game. So hopefully in a roundabout way, I kind of answered that question, because there isn't really a magic formula to why a game gets reviewed. But I can say to a point that none of us at MVM and probably none of us here are going to probably spend the time and effort to really review a game that's just absolutely bad. It's a lot of work to review something that we just absolutely don't like. So I think honestly, when you look at the games that we don't talk about, it's almost as indicative of what we like as the games we do talk about.
I'm gonna interject for a second. I've reviewed a couple of games that were genuinely bad, but they're generally coming from big publishers who I feel like they can take it.
Sure.
No, seriously. If it's from a small group, a small designer, small publisher, we're gonna reach out first and be like, "Hey, did we get something wrong here?" Or like, is it? Because I've played enough games that just don't fit with my family that I can say like, this is a good game, but it wasn't for us. And I've also played games that are mass market, terrible games that are just being thrown out there for kids and are bad. And so, yeah, we hate reviewing bad games and we try not to do it.
We're all people, right? So like we're aware that someone's going to read it, and someone who has put some time and effort into building something is going to see a bad review, and there's emotional reactions to that, right? So yeah, it's something that that we try to be mindful of, and you guys just absolutely hit the nail on the head. Selection bias is a natural thing. It's going to happen.
Nobody can review everything.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say too that as far as negative reviews go, there are times where I will ask for something or someone will reach out to me. Okay, that looks pretty cool. I'll play it. It's not great. And I might give it a bad review and say, this isn't for me. This may be for you. Mm-hmm. Now, there have been times where I have shown disinterest in a game, and yet somehow a publisher, and they generally do tend to be indie publishers, get that game to me anyway. And it just shows up cold call. I will say that I do tend to be a little bit harsher on that. I have written some pretty bad reviews before. There was, and I'm not going to name names, a company a long time ago when I wrote for Purple Pawn at a toy fair that they really were pushing for me to review a game. I said, I am really not interested. This is not my style of game. But at Toy Fair, every booth scans your badge. They get your address. And won't you know, 4 days later, that game showed up in the mail. So I played it. And I absolutely hated it like I knew I would. And I was probably more brutal than I should have been earlier on in my career, saying that it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. But I will generally, especially if I ask for a game or agree to review a game, I will go back to that publisher or that designer and be like, look, it wasn't for me. I can still post something and I will phrase it like this. Or if you like, I will just hold off. And I will say that 9 times out of 10, they still want me to post the review.
Yep.
100%. And in that case too, I try to bring up the positives. I try to say, people who like these type of games might like this. Mm-hmm. So take my rating with a grain of salt.
So I think the big takeaway here is if a reviewer is upfront with someone and says, hey, listen, this is not going to work for us, we're not lying.
Yeah,
like we're telling the truth. And a lot of that is born out of the compassion that we're going to have for someone and their game. We're going to say, look, you know what, this maybe it looks cool, but this is a dudes on a map game. It is not going to work for our family, or for our site or channel or whatever. We're not lying when we say that, and so it's in everybody's best interest to accept that as fact. So.
And I will say that if a reviewer, for any reason, sometimes I will try to be nice and I'll be like, I really just don't have time to look at this. Don't push and be like, well, it doesn't matter if you do it 3, 4, 5 months from now. Really, what I'm trying to say is I'm not super interested.
Yeah, I've also heard kind of along these lines that there are some reviewers out there who just don't post bad reviews. And their thought is the people who are coming to their site want to learn about good games, not about bad games. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, if I play a game that, like I said, that I don't like, but maybe for someone else, I got to post about it. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, and somebody might be coming to Upon's perspective like, what is your thought on this game? If I only have positive reviews, then I don't know, it kind of cheapens it a little bit. And I know I kind of just said I mostly post positive, but the occasional bad review here and there shows that, yeah, I tried something that I really thought looked kind of cool and it didn't turn out to be cool. And people need to know that too.
The other thing is, our channels may not be, I mean, I'm sure that they are, for some people, destination locations for reviews. Somebody will go to thefamilygamers.com. So like, well, I mean, I've liked their stuff before. Let's see what they're writing about now. I guarantee you, I can pull up the analytics and show you, most people are just searching for a game, and the reviews that come up are the reviews that they're going to read. Mm-hmm. And if my brother or sister, cousin, whatever is like, well, I got $25 to spend at Amazon, like I should buy a game, or I'm thinking about buying a game, what do I want to get? There's both value in saying this game is good, and also, no, bro, don't do it, right? Because it's not a vacuum, right? Somebody is making a purchasing decision with their dollars, and they both say yes and no, right? And so if something comes in, regardless, we're now past the topic of what kind of games we look for, but if something comes in and we need to make a decision about a game, if it's bad, it's bad. It is what it is, right?
Lauren had posted a question about casting who reviews your work. And I wouldn't say it's as much casting as you do want to put your game in the hands of people who are going to be the audience for your game. Look at Phase Shift Games Dungeon Drop. Like, this is a great game for me to review. It's a great game for the family gamers to review. Man vs. Meeple, they do more Euro stuff, maybe not. If you're going to give it to a site, that it's a bunch of grognards playing heavy historical war games, they're not going to care about that. You're going to want to try to find a site that caters to the audience that you're looking to play your game. So it's not, I wouldn't call it casting, because it's not like you're making people audition to review your game. It's just you really want to place your bets where you think you're going to get the best results.
Yeah, I think Rob nailed it. You really, really need to research the channels that you're sending it to. I mean, the example I like to say is, if you have the next Azul, you don't want to send it to Heavy Cardboard, because they're playing 4-hour-long Lacerda games. That's not their cup of tea. And I think knowing the channels and knowing how they react to certain games, because first of all, if it's a review, if it's a family game, then it's much more likely that Andrew and Anita are actually going to follow through and do a full review than maybe we would at MVM. For us to review like a family game, it has to be like the best family game, because we really don't do family games. And so knowing all of that, knowing like me personally, like I'm a big fan of science fiction games and space games. And if you watch the channel enough, you'll pick up on that pretty quick. So if you have a space game and you ask me if I want to like take a look at it, my answer is probably yes. But there are other people that will just say no, straight on theme alone, right? So you don't need to watch every piece of content, but just at least get kind of an idea of what people are going to like before you start sending it out.
And Jeff, I will definitely recommend a fellow reviewer if I feel that a game doesn't work for me. Even if I have the game in my possession, like I thought it might be something I would enjoy, and then I get it and I'm like, Madara comes to mind. It was a kind of a miniatures very epic feeling game, and I got it. And the artwork was a little bit, it's not something I'd play with my kids. It's not something I'd play with my wife. Not something I would get to the table. I passed it off to another reviewer. Looked like a really awesome game. Heard great things about it. Just wasn't something that I could see playing. So I handed it off. And if the game doesn't come to me, I am more than happy to be like, hey, I may not be the best person to look at this game. Have you tried so-and-so? I'm more than happy to give another reviewer a plug, because honestly, I don't feel like it's not a competition between different review sites at all. Working together is how we all grow.
Especially if it's a game that you wouldn't do, I would imagine, who cares if someone else does it? You were never going to do that game to begin with. So,
right.
Well, I can give an example too. Anyone who's actually, a fan and follows our site knows that our family doesn't like Take That games historically. And it's a type of game that gets pitched a lot at family game reviewers because a lot of families do like it. And so it's one of those where if somebody pitches a Take That game at us, it's like, well, let me check with one of our writers who likes those. But if they're full up on Take That, I'm just going to have to push you off. I'll try to recommend you to another family review site that would like it. But if you keep pushing it on us, we'll take it. And then we'll say, wow, just like other Take That games, this didn't really work well for us.
So our next question here is, how do you typically go about finding your games that you're going to produce content about? Are you reaching out to publishers? Are you having publishers reach out to you? Is it both? Is there one that you do more often? Ryan, why don't you start with this?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So when we first started our channel, we have Jeremy and David now. Jeremy used to do component reviews back years ago under Draken Strike's component reviews. So when MVM started, he kind of had a little bit of a foothold in the industry. So we did kind of start at a little bit of a privileged space because of that. But even so, like, we had to basically go like booth to publishers, or that, they were constantly emailing publishers, talking to publishers, just saying, hey, like, just send us a game and we'll review it, right? Nowadays, like, when your channel gets to be a certain size, like Rob mentioned, you do get just a lot of unsolicited things that you didn't ask for. People will just send you stuff, and as long as as the sender that there's a good chance it might just end up played and not actually reviewed, then all's good. But those things can't really come with attachments or strings attached, because we just get so many now. But if you're a small channel, and you really want to grow, like, definitely getting to know publishers and also designers. Because if you play a game at like an Unpub event that you really like, talk to that designer. They can probably speak to the publisher on your behalf or make the introduction if you don't know them. And that's kind of how you get in with these things. Like, you need to start making those connections. I mean, you can just start buying games off the shelf, bringing them home, reviewing them. And if your format is good and you start building an audience, then yeah, you can generate that interest without ever having to like talk to a publisher. They'll just start reaching out to you. But people don't always have the amount of capital they need to really, like, because you're already investing in equipment, and to have to buy so many games to play through just to find the one that really speaks to your audience can be tough. And I think publishers do understand that. At least in my experience, they've always been very amiable, certain exceptions, but generally speaking, like, as long as you tell them, like, hey, we did play this game you sent us, but we didn't love it, right? So we're probably not going to spend the 10 to 15 hours it would take to play that game 4 or 5 times to really get a feel for it and then review it, right? So yeah, at this stage, and the bigger you get, and especially once you carve out your audience, like, if you become known for something, then you are going to start to get people from that niche just sending you games or contacting you all the time. And I mean, we do that kind of with Euro games. So we have a lot of Euro designers, or especially companies that are bringing Euro games over from like Germany over to the US. We get a lot of contact from them because they want to try to drum up, interest for it in America as well. So it's all about finding the publishers that work well with what you're trying to do at your channel.
How about you, Rob? How do you reach out or have publishers reach out to you? Obviously, sometimes they just randomly send you games, but
yeah. like I said, I've been doing this a long time now. So when I first started, it was emailing people, reaching out, and when I first started that, I mean, 1 out of 10 times that would work. And then I started going to conventions, and like a toy fair was my first one ever, and even then, it's a new face. But as I started showing up year after year and meeting the same people over and over again and building these relationships, I'd say now it's a good mix of sometimes I will ask a publisher specifically for a game, whether it's a rep that I know or someone new, or sometimes publishers will reach out to me and, okay, Rob, here's what I've got, what interests you? And we'll send that along. Sometimes some companies do just send a box of games because larger companies can afford to do that, and they'll send a note. Hey, if you want to review any of these, great, if they strike your fancy. And there's never that attachment of here's what you have to do. So yeah, now it's a good mixture of me maybe seeing something I like and being like, hey, I'd love to take a look at that, or just picking from a list that a publisher sends and says, okay, out of the 6 titles that you've sent a list of, I'd like to take a look at this 1 or 2.
I'll follow on here. Of the 3 channels represented here, we are the smallest by far. And we have some relationships with publishers, a few who will randomly send us stuff, just be like, hey, I thought you guys would like this. But mostly it's usually us reaching out to publishers and saying, hey, we saw that this is in your newest list of stuff. We would love to review it for you. In our case, we also get more or less cold calls through our website of people saying like, I don't have a publisher. Well, not I don't have a publisher. I've self-published this game, but it is out and available. Here's a little blurb about it. Would you guys be interested in reviewing it? And that's fine. We don't do a lot that way, but we do some when they're ones that seem to fit with our family and our channel. Early on, we did a lot of going to conventions, and especially smaller conventions.
Obviously not in 2020, but
well, yeah.
I miss conventions immensely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm the schmoozer out of the 2 of us. So I'm the one who is like, all right, we'll go to a convention because I care more about the relationship with the publisher than I do about that game, right?
I just want to play the games.
She just wants to play. That's fine. It works out well. But sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
I just feel like we don't go to convention. I love conventions.
No. Nobody goes to conventions right now. That's the problem. But normally we make a lot of these relationships, both with publishers and individually with designers, going to conventions. And in our case, especially smaller conventions, regional conventions.
Boston Fig is a fantastic
Boston
example.
Fig, which we were talking about before the recording, is a great example of that.
We're in Central Mass, so we drive to Boston Fig with all of our children, which usually results in us carrying kids at the end of the day. But that's okay. It's worth it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and thanks for the shout out for Boston Fig there.
Absolutely.
So as we're talking about this, what would you say is the ideal situation when you are looking for a new game or a publisher is coming to you with a new game? Ideally, how would you want them to be able to work with you? Rob, let's start with you.
I'm really easy. You want to send me a game? Send me a game. No bells, whistles. If it's a completed production copy of a game, send me an email, say, hey, are you interested? I'll shoot you my address if I am. If you have a specific time frame, let me know. If not, it goes into the queue, which I generally make that pretty clear. I like to keep in touch with people. So on my end, when a review goes up, I usually notify people, tag them on Facebook, that kind of thing. What I don't like is I don't like the one and done. Hey, look at my game. You get the review. I never hear from you again. I like to keep relationships with people, even if you don't have another game coming out for another year or two. 2 years later, you have another game. 3 years later, you're a small designer, and I've seen you a few times at conventions. Shoot me an email. Be like, hey, Rob, it was great seeing you here. I've got something new. Are you interested? I have built great relationships with companies that were once small and who are now, much, much larger just by keeping in touch with them. And I've grown with companies, and I really love that because I do love the people in the industry. Like Andrew said, I love going to the conventions. I love the networking. almost as much or maybe even more than the actual playing and reviewing of the games. Because I have met so many great people, and it wasn't that way when I first started doing this. It wasn't until I got out to conventions and I started meeting these people, and then I realized, like, oh, the next convention, hey, I'm really excited to see this person again and sit down and chat and catch up. And okay, yeah, they got some cool new games, and I can scratch their back, they can scratch mine, kind of a deal. I do like to have a relationship with a company or a designer when it comes to games. I don't want to be cold called, sent a game, post a review, and then that's the last I hear of the person. I want to hear about your successes. I want to hear about your failures. I want to hear that, hey, you were thinking of doing this and it didn't turn out, but it turned into this. I absolutely love that.
I just think, Rob, what you just said was just great for me, because like that relationship is what matters. Like if we're at a convention together, like with a publisher, like let's try to meet up. Let's go to your booth. Let's show me what you've got. And I love publishers that take that hands-on approach, and they're really eager. They don't just want to send you a game. They want to show you the game, and they want to talk to you about the game, and they want to show you what they love about the game and why they're making that game. And I wanted to make sure I'm going to kind of call out one publisher in specific or raise them up a little bit, and that's Board and Dice. They do a lot of great Euro games. Board and Dice has been just a great publisher to work with because they are so excited about their games that they won't just send us a game. They will call us. They will offer to teach us the game on Tabletop Simulator. They will send us all the artwork from the game, the assets, the everything that we could possibly need. They're always there. And they're not the only one that does that, but I just mentioned them because we've been working a lot with them lately on their new catalog, and they were the same way, like what Rob mentioned earlier. They said, hey, here's what we have coming out in 2021. Tell us which games you want. We'll get on Tabletop Simulator. We will teach them all to you, and then you can decide the ones you like. We'll actually send you, and then you can review them. And I think that's a really great way to do that, and it really builds a relationship, because when I go to a convention now, I go hang out with them. That's just like on my list of things to do. And I think you really get to develop those relationships with the publishers to a point where there are certain publishers where it doesn't even matter what the game is. I will take a look at it because of the relationship and because of the proven track record from that publisher, that I might not like it, but I will give every game they do a chance, right? And not everyone can go to conventions, or it can be expensive. But I think actually the one benefit to come out of COVID was these online conventions, because this does give you a chance to interact with and talk to people that you probably might not get a chance to do in a personal convention. So for those who are out there right now that are designers and want to get to know content creators and start building that relationship, like this is a really good time to do it at these virtual conventions.
Anitra and Andrew, same question to you. Ideal situation working with a publisher.
So, I mean, for us, generally speaking, we really prefer that the content that we put out in terms of pictures or video or audio or whatever is original and unique. So we actually don't tend to use publisher assets all that much. It's just the way our site is put together. It's just not a thing that we do.
They're still nice to have.
They are nice to have. They're nice for reference purposes. But I think it was Rob that mentioned this. The number one most important thing when I am talking to any publisher, any designer, anything, is making sure that we are on the same page with expectations. Mm-hmm. Whether it's timing, whether it's what kind of review do you want, whatever it is. Because, Rob mentioned like a publisher might send us 6 games. Well, I can tell you we will play this. These are the things I can say for sure. We're going to play them all. Okay. At a bare minimum, we have a weekly podcast. We will bring those games up on our podcast. We will probably talk about them for a couple minutes, things that did work, things that did not work. If that's enough for you, guess what? We're golden. If you expect a written review out of us, that's fine. But especially if it's unsolicited, you better tell me. I just need to know. We've had like right now, if we get a message, Anitra mentioned the website. Sometimes we'll get a message from the website. We've actually had people start to message us on BGG saying, hey, I have a game, would you take a look at it? Which is fun.
They'll find you some way.
They will. And my answer generally, like right now, my answer is that's fine. we have 3 months of scheduled content minimum right now. There is no way, if you want your review out before June, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it might be 6 months before
or
we have a
whatever.
chance to
If
seriously
it just
take a
shows
look.
up, that's just what's going to happen. And most people are fine with that. But we've also had things show up on our doorstep, and then we get, 6 weeks in, we get like a kind of an angry email about it, and it's like
hey, when are you going to get around to this? Be like,
it's in the queue.
You didn't
man.
ask until now.
So those shared expectations are so hugely important. And then the other thing I just kind of want to add on this, that's really the number one thing. Like, we can find assets. If you're giving us something to take a look at, we're going to take pictures. We're going to provide that content. That stuff is fine. Sometimes we do silly stuff. We just reviewed the Funko Games Pop-Tarts game. So we did a whole video about us eating a ridiculous number of It was kind of gross, actually. But we'll have fun with those things if we can, but we need to understand what your expectations are. It's so, so important, because it prevents you from being frustrated because we didn't give you what you thought you were getting from us. And it prevents us from putting ourselves in a bad situation, or potentially being in, having a bad relationship with a designer or a publisher or something like that, because we didn't realize that there was some kind of expectation that wasn't shared or wasn't shared clearly.
Yeah.
So that's super, super important. It might be the single most important thing when we look at this kind of board game for review transaction, which is sort of what we're talking about here. The only other thing I want to add to that is that, again, these relationships are so incredibly important. There's a lot of movement in the board game industry. I can think of people that started at one company, went to another company, went to a third company, and now they're somewhere else, something like that. Danny Lowe is a perfect example of this. She's been at like 4 or 5 different companies, just moving from. And,
in the 6 years we've been doing this, yeah.
PR at ELO, and it's Danny, and then all of a sudden now she's over at Gamma or whatever, and now she's at Pandasaurus or whatever. So these people move around. The relationship is the same relationship, though, and developing those relationships is so incredibly important. So I would say the biggest thing is just making sure that the expectations are clearly communicated. Before we did the Family Gamers, I wrote for a video game site, and I was kind of the indie game guy. And the reason why I was the indie game guy is because I would go to a convention, and I really just wasn't like the marketing people for, really big like Activision. I was the marketing guy for a big company. But if I went around the corner to like the tiny booths, like at PAX East, and I talked to the people that actually made the games that they were talking about, they were so much more excited. And again, it's that relationship, and there is nobody who cares more about your game than you. It's just the way it is. And so make sure that if you have an infectious joy for your game, that you communicate that in some way, at least physically. Like, don't harass somebody online, please. But nobody cares more about your game than you. And as long as everybody's on the same page, things will probably work out.
I think that's good advice. That's something I tell my students all the time. Like, if you can't be excited about your own game, how are you going to get anyone else excited about it as well? So, just make sure that you love your games. One thing that we did talk about, and I heard you talking about assets and stuff from the publishers. So we do have some questions about press kits or media packages. So I want to ask you, do you like getting a press kit from a publisher? Do you use them? What do you like about them if you do like them? And for those who don't know, a press kit is usually a web page that has assets from the game. So professional shots of the game, language about what the game is about, any other information that might be important for some kind of reviewer or media personality to know about your game that they can then put forth. So that way they don't have to, take their own pictures or whatnot. How do you feel about press kits? And I'm going to start with you, Anitra and Andrew, because it sounds like you said you like them, but you don't necessarily use them. So how does that work?
Okay, so I do most of the photography, not just for us, but for a lot of our other written reviewers as well. So I like press kits because I'm trying to take photos on a tiny little desk in my bedroom because that's the only space I have. I want to use my own photos as much as possible, but sometimes, especially with bigger games, I just don't have the space to get like the whole board layout or, get a really good shot of the box cover in particular. Box covers can be really tough to take a good picture of. So even though I am always going to use some of my own photography, I still really like having the press kit because it's hey, here's a super clean shot of the box lid, the box cover. I don't even have to think about that now. I can just, cut it, paste it in. Good. We're done with that. Now I can just take pictures of the small, cards and components and maybe one shot across the board. Press kits also show a level of investment in a game that, I'm not going to see usually from somebody who's self-publishing. It is what it is. But it's another way of showing that you're excited about your game in a very professional way.
The only other thing I'm going to add to that is I mentioned before about the importance of being on the same page and setting expectations and making sure that those expectations are known. I have reviewed games in the past. Here's a perfect example. Hub Games released a game called Prisma Arena, which I love. That game is fantastic.
Oh, good.
That game is fantastic for reasons that Rory O'Connor was perfectly honest with, that a lot of reviewers didn't talk about, which was the narrative of the game and how the game fit outside of the construct of actually just playing the game individually, and the wholesome approach of the game.
And what it's teaching kids.
Yeah,
and
all that stuff.
of that.
Well,
yeah.
This is, maybe a lesson for Rory and the Hub Games team. If they had a white paper that detailed those specific things that they were going after, to really just to draw a reviewer's attention to the fact that there are things outside of the mechanics of this game that they should be paying attention to, that may have helped them with their perspective, and more people might have picked up on that. I'm glad that we wrote about it and he was happy, because then he was like, you got it and other people missed it. It made us look great. But
I don't like that other people missed it.
But the reality of that is that it's not great for him, because he wanted everybody to talk about that thing. So just like shared expectations on timing, shared expectations on maybe the unique things that you think your game is bringing to the space, those are things that you can accomplish on like a white paper or something like that. That would be
could be part of that press kit.
Absolutely.
How about you, Ryan? How do you feel about press kits?
Well, I definitely have opinions on press kits, but before I talk about those, I think it's good to talk about something that somebody said in the comments, which is the difference between what is a review and what is a preview or an overview video. Because we at MVM do a lot of these because we like to bring attention to games. We use our platform to show games. Now, for a review, it's probably already out or it's about to come out and I know what it is, and that's great. Press kits help. But when it's a preview or an overview and you're maybe going to Kickstarter and you want that marketing push and you want us to do either a live stream of your game or show it off on the channel in some other way, having a press packet is huge, and something that shows like the sell sheet of the game. Like if I can look at a sell sheet and I can immediately say, this isn't one that we are interested in, right? Because we can't say yes to everybody that wants an overview video or a live stream. So if I could take one quick look and say, this one's not for me, or if the sell sheet looks really great and then I can dive into the press kit, it's great. If you're going to approach a reviewer without a physical game, like send them the rule book, because if I can look through a PDF of the rule book or a digital version of the rule book, and I can start reading about the mechanics, and I'm immediately maybe interested. And it doesn't help to, talk a little bit. I think Andrew just mentioned this. You are your biggest hype man. So if you approach us through an email and you spend a little bit of time just talking about why your game is a good fit or the best parts of your game, and then that's all again in that sell sheet and that's in that press kit. And if you can send me artwork from the game and images and things like that I can look through, it just helps us out a lot, because we can very quickly decide if a game is for us or not. And if it's not for us, that's not a critique on the designer or the publisher or anything like that. It's just maybe this isn't a good fit for what we're trying to do. So I think they are incredibly helpful. Of course, the bigger you are as a publisher, the less you're going to need that, because who hasn't heard of like Eric Lang, right? Like if you tell me the game's by Eric Lang, sure, I don't need a press kit or a sell sheet for that. I will take a look at it, right? And there's certain designers and certain publishers that can do that. But I think especially the smaller you are, having those sheets, or even something that you could just pass out at conventions, not maybe a full press kit, but like that has a link or a QR code that will take people to that press kit, can be very huge in getting attention to your game.
And in a way that you're not shipping your game out to reviewers to then play it and decide that it's not for them.
Right, exactly. It's much easier to email me a sell sheet and let me say, yeah, I am actually interested in this, than it is to just have a game show up that I might never really be interested in.
How about you, Rob? What are your thoughts?
I love press kits because I am not good at taking photographs. I mean, I could take an Instagram photo, not a great one, but when I try to take like nice photos for one of my reviews or one of my articles, they just don't come out well. I love
Photos are hard, man.
Yeah, they are. And my wife is a professional photographer, and I've had her take photos for me, and they come out great. And then I look at one of mine, and it's like, wow, it looks like a game on a table. So I love having professional photos. I love a sell sheet, like Ryan was talking about. Lauren in the comments had mentioned video demos. Those I'm not as big on, because if I want to be able to read the rules and see if I can learn to play the game that way. That's important to me. I may watch the video and then read the rules, and the rules make more sense to me because I've now seen, how it's played, and I'm not going to use video demos in my reviews or articles anyway. But yeah, image is good. Sell sheets, really good. I will say one other thing is that if you email me and you want to send me a sell sheet, give me an image, give me a PDF. Do not make your email the sell sheet. I don't want to see different fonts, different font sizes. I don't want to see bold. I don't want to see all caps, 2,000 exclamation points, and 90 colors in an email. I want a plain text email. Or if you're sending an HTML email via like MailChimp or something, that's a little bit different. I want a professional email. And if you can't do a professionally done email, plain text is very professional. And I want to see like, hey, Rob, or, how's it going? I want you to introduce yourself. And I don't want that email in any way, shape, or form to look like it was sent out to 50 people at once.
Dear reviewer.
Yeah. And then you accidentally forgot to put my name in, and it says, dear insert reviewer's name here. Give me a plain text email that's written from you to me, or give me an email, like a marketing email that's sent through an ESP. Don't go crazy with fonts and colors and everything like that. Send me a sell sheet.
I think if I could just jump in, because Rob, that speaks to me so much, because you already spoke about having that relationship. I want to know in the email, first of all, that you actually know who I am, and that you actually put a little bit of effort into figuring out, we think this game is a good fit for you. And so if it's just a form email that you obviously sent to 50 people, then, I mean, why do I think that you even know who we are, right? Like, Rob, tell me why your game is good for us. Tell me why you think, if it's to me, tell me why you think I would like it, right? Just a little bit of sign that we're going to build this relationship. This isn't just please just review my game because I need reviews, right? Like, that relationship is important.
Every one of us has a vested interest in being available on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
we are
information
everywhere
about us.
It's
our job to be everywhere, so you can find us.
And I will say, one of the biggest things that turns me off of an email is when the first words are, hey, Rob, I looked at your site and I think my game is a good fit for your readers. That is usually a sign that you have not looked at my site and you don't understand my readership at all, because that is always followed by, here is my drinking game that is exactly the same as Cards Against Humanity, but it uses a different font. Or here is my game about how I want to dunk everyone's head in a toilet and poop on them. And I swear to God, I get these type of emails for these card games that, it's like, oh, let's, find President Trump's wig, or it's just Cards Against Humanity, but instead of being super offensive, we're only slightly offensive in kind of vague ways. But I looked at your site and this is a perfect fit for your readers.
Yup.
We've gotten that email. The Family Gamers.
Yep. That is a clear clue that you haven't even looked at the name of our site, much less the content on it.
Or
Family Gamers AA.
And if you get my name wrong, if I get an email that says, hey, Ron, I understand a typo here or there, but when you say Ron like 10 times in the email, I know that you don't even know who I
The
am.
mail merge failed. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
That's also how you know it was copy and pasted.
So-
I was like,
so I
hey,
have
Phil,
a-
how's it going?
So I have a trick question for you, Rob.
Yep.
What kind of a game would be perfect for your readers?
For my readers, something that's really thematic, eye-catching art, and it could be a Euro, and it could be an RPG, it could be a miniatures game. But I am looking for something that is visually striking, even an abstract. Look at something like Shobu or Tak, games that just have an appeal to them, that have a cool factor to them, and then don't look like they were slapped together as like a marketing. I can tell when I get an email from a marketer, you know, when they say that they are the inventor of a game, like they're pitching something at Toy Fair, or I want something really cool from a designer that has put their heart and soul into an experience. Not a, and I can't say that, you know, not a 5-minute game that you're going to pick up on the shelf at Walmart. I have played some great card games that were presented to me in a non kind of gimmicky or sales manner that I said, okay, I'm not so sure, but I'm going to give this a chance. And I've loved the games. There was one recently, it was on I forgot if it was the Game Crafter or whatever. It was called Scully Bunnies. This is a game that doesn't look like I would ever play. It looked like it was super simple, very gimmicky, like but they approached me the right way. I played it. My kids and I had a blast with it. And it's a simple game, but there's enough choices and depth there that we played it and we enjoyed it. Now, if they had sent me a very different email about this game, I never would have taken a look at it. I would have been like, okay, the art is okay. This email is a mess. Like, the art isn't what got me into that game. But the email that the person sent me caught my eye. They caught my attention. It was personal, you know, towards me. It was a polite ask. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a look at this. And yeah, we really dug it. So, I mean, I do cover a very broad range of things, whether it's family games or miniatures games or RPGs, but it's got to have some kind of appeal to it. Like I said, whether it's by play, whether it's by how it looks, whether how the rule book is written, and it's got to be presented to me in the right way. I don't know how, it's kind of like a wishy-washy kind of answer, but, you know, I want that connection with you as a designer or with you as a publisher. And I want something cool. I mean, at the end of the day, I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of games. I just want something cool to play.
Yeah, I think one of the recurring themes about this, and then I promised him I'll give it back to you. I promise. We want people to care about what they're doing, to be excited about what they're doing, and to invest in what they're doing. And that doesn't mean money, doesn't mean time, it doesn't mean, you know, any specific thing. But whether it's building those relationships, whether it's actually formatting your email, whether it's personalizing those things, it's about, you know, showing that you care and you are invested in what you're doing. And if you're invested, that's going to get other people to be invested too. And that's what's really important.
I mean, you can tell when an email comes through from a company that's just trying to make a buck on something. And you can tell when you get an email from somebody who has spent a year, 2 years, 3 years designing a game that is like their pride and joy. And the next year, it may not be their pride and joy because they realized all the mistakes they made and now they've got something better, but they were passionate about it. Like, yeah. You know, it's just like as a writer, I go back and I look at something I wrote 2 years ago and I thought was great then. I'm like, wow, that's crap. You might feel that as a game designer, but at the time, this is your passion. This is the best thing you have ever done. And you're not just trying to pitch it to me so you can sell, you know, 100 copies to a school and make a quick buck, or to a corporation and make a quick buck.
I think that's any creative pursuit, right? We look at, you know, the first couple of years that we were doing things and we were like, ooh, that really sucked. And now that we're older and wizened, we know, yeah, this is what makes a good game.
There's something humbling about something that you thought was great, and other people still think is great and worthwhile, and you look back and you're like, oh, I wouldn't do it that way now.
Yeah.
So our last big question for each of you is, what would you say is the one most important thing that small designers or small publishers should know about interacting with board game reviewers and other media? I'm going to throw this one to you, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm not going to call out anybody, but I will say that the attitude is 100% everything. I know that you think that your game is probably the best game ever made, but it's also probably not the best game ever made. There are some exceptions to that because someone did it already. But we sometimes get people that just come to us, and I think Rob even touched on this. Like we should be so impressed and so honored that they considered us for this because they've reinvented whatever genre. Like it's not the case. Like, right, we all work in kind of marketing. That's a lot of what we do. So when I get an email or approached by somebody that's entirely just marketing speak without any real idea of like what's actually being talked about, that just turns me off from people. And another thing is to understand that like what we do, whether it's being a review, which a lot of times is something that is going to be done completely for free because nobody likes to take money for reviews. That's a whole ethical thing. So we're investing our time and our effort and our energy into that because we love it. Or even if it is something that you paid for, if we provided a overview for you or a live play for you or just some kind of paid promotional content, sometimes there is a sense of entitlement that might come along with that. And I think it's important to know that when you're working with a content creator, it is like working with any marketing company. It is a team experience. Like we're invested. We wouldn't have said, yes, we'll live stream your game if we thought it was bad or if we didn't want it to succeed on Kickstarter, GameFound, or wherever it's happening to be. We want your game to do well. So just, understand that if we do, number one, make mistakes, they were not intentional. Like that is a key thing to do. And sometimes, I've been called out for using the wrong terminology. With people not really understanding that we might read 6 rule books, and if one of them calls coins, and the next one calls them credits, and the third one calls them doubloons, it's very possible that I'll get halfway through a live play and I will start calling your credits coins. That just those are things that happen, and to a point we do try to avoid any of those things. But when you come to us from a place of hey, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And I just want you to know, hey, this was kind of a mistake. Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. But, coming from a place of just anger and looking for a fight almost, just keep in mind that you are on the same page. We are all trying to work together here. And I think that is the 100% thing, because no matter how good your game is, if your attitude was very bad throughout the entire process, then there's a really good chance that we're not going to want to work with you again. And that could be for any publisher, that could be for any designer, that could be for anyone. There's just a level of mutual respect that has to come from both sides. And I know that sounds like common sense, but a lot of people, don't really have that mentality when they come into one of these relationships. A lot of it is what can I get from you? And if we do a review for you, and maybe we don't love it, like Rob said, if I'll say, this game really wasn't for me, but if you like X game, then you probably like this. That isn't a bad thing. We're still doing the review that we agreed to do for you. And it's important to note that just because we might give something a lower score or not like something at all, it's not a personal reflection on you as a designer or a publisher or anything that you've done, because we all know you put a ton of hard work into this. So just be understanding when you're working with content creators. We're still people, and we still have feelings. Just we're not going to trash your game. Please don't trash our live stream if it wasn't as glowing as maybe you've wanted it to be, which is something that's actually happened. They didn't like that we didn't overly praise the game throughout every step of the live stream, which let us do our own thing, right?
And I will say, I like to follow up is never tell a content creator or a media person that their opinion is wrong. So many
Yes.
times where even if I've given a lukewarm review, the first thing I get back is, well, 500 playtesters absolutely loved this game. Well, that's great. I wasn't one of those 500. I don't love this game. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong. Like, don't try to tell me that I'm wrong because I did or did not like something about your game, or I thought a certain way about your game. I don't care about what 500 playtesters thought. I don't care that your mom thought it was the greatest board game ever made. I feel the way I feel about a game, and I am conveying that. You are not doing me a favor by sending me a free game. Because yes, I am getting a free game and I am putting in how many hours of work to play it and write it up and take the time. I am a reviewer and I'm a content creator because I love gaming. But if I just wanted your game for free, I would take your game for free and that would be it. I wouldn't put the hours upon hours of work and stress and anxiety over, is this getting done on time and how big is my review pile right now and all these things. Just know that we are having a mutual exchange. I am helping you out by promoting your game. You are helping me out by providing me content to post about, and try to keep it as pleasant and personal as possible. And if I say something that you may not like Ryan said, it is not a slight against you. Unless I specifically say I am slighting this person. But if I say like, hey, this was a really cool game, but I really didn't like this one thing, don't come at me with the hate for that. I'm giving you my opinion. That's what you wanted. Just because you gave me the game doesn't mean I'm going to say great things about it.
I think the most important thing for small publishers, small designers to realize about game reviewers is we're real people too. And we have all kinds of things outside of game review that are, stressors or impinging on our time. And so don't feel like, well, I gave you this game and now I deserve, a good review. I deserve you to talk me up on social media, whatever. On both sides of this transaction, nobody deserves anything except a respect for the other party. Nearly every game reviewer is doing this as a hobby. Maybe they bring in a little bit of like pizza cash. There's only one Tom Vessel. And the rest of us are doing this really because we feel like it's important work to do and we love doing it. Not because we want to rain on everybody's parade, not because we want a big old pile of free games. And so the important thing is that we're real people. Please treat us like real people, and then we'll treat you like real people too. We'll have a dialogue and we'll say, this is the time frame that I can do this in. Is that okay with you? Like, does that work for you? And, and you can come back and say, well, it doesn't work for me. Okay, you need to go with a different reviewer. I just can't do it right now. And that respect is the biggest thing by far.
I have a whole jumble of thoughts around this. I'll start with the short one, which is, I guarantee you I can spend less time mowing lawns to make enough money to buy your game than it's going to take me in time to review your game.
Yes.
So that entitlement mentality is like, dude, I will go mow my neighbor's lawn and we won't have to have this conversation.
And I don't have to drag my kids to the table to do that.
In our case,
That is true.
we have to deal with that part as well. Anitra kind of touched on this relationship thing. Like, and Ryan, you touched on this whole, I know you think your game is great, but it's probably not the best game thing. This is not a zero-sum game. There can be, no pun intended, there can be multiple games that are really good. You see this thing behind us, because we didn't do a fancy Rob screen. We are at the point in our purging life where we are purging games that are good.
Games that we like.
Because there's so many great games.
Totally.
And so your game cannot, like, almost by definition can't be the best game. It just can't. I'm sorry. It's just not. It can be good and it can be great and we can love it.
And it might be the best game for 3 or 4 people out there. And what you're doing looking for reviewers is finding a way to reach those people and their friends for whom this is going to be the best game.
Right. And I do want to add one more thing. We've spent a long time here because we're board game reviewer people talking about all the ways that you should treat us, right? No, we have, right? I mean, I'm doing this kind of with a little bit of, whatever. There are also board game reviewers that just plain suck. Real life, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So the question here, a little bit of how the sausage is made. We got questions in advance. What would you say are the most important things that new designers or publishers should know when working with board game media? Look for people that have been doing this for a while, because we have reputations that we care about.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people, and it's not always malicious. In fact, usually it's not, that start to get a little bit of interest in their channel and they just blow up. And then 3 months later, they're gone. They just flame out. They way overcommit. And then all of a sudden, they've got all this stuff, and they just are swamped, and they have an anxiety attack, and you never hear from them again. I strongly recommend that you find channels that seem to jive with what you're doing, that seem to reach the audience that you're trying to reach with your game, and that have been doing this at least for long enough to establish some kind of reputation. Because there's a lot of us on both sides of the fence. There's designers that are kind of crappy, and there's reviewers that are kind of crappy. And I strongly look, it is what it is. I strongly recommend that you just spend a little bit of that extra time, that extra research, to make sure that Rob is Rob and not Ron. And also, he's been doing it for a while. These are all super important things, and it's really to protect yourself too, because I understand, for example, that game prototypes can be expensive. That's why Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator are so awesome. That's one of the great values of a sell sheet, or some of these things where you can communicate these facts without spending much cash. You don't want to send a copy of Tidal Blaze across the country to find out that some dude doesn't really like rolling dice, because guess what? You just wasted like a really expensive game. You don't want to do those things. We have the availability and the technology and all of these tools at our disposal to make sure that we're focusing our attention on the content streams that are going to be supportive to us, both in terms of the interests of their audience and in terms of the reputation that those people have.
I'll say the one theme that I kind of saw through a lot of this is that it's a very, very much a relationship kind of thing. And I'm seeing you all nod right now to say, like, yes, we want relationships with publishers and designers. And what you're saying with this last question here is something that members of Game Makers Guild have heard me say probably hundreds of times. My students hear me say it hundreds of times, which is, don't be a dick. This is a small industry, and everyone knows everyone. And if you start getting a reputation for being that type of designer or that type of publisher that treats people like crap, then
reviewer,
yep, then other people in the industry are not going to want to work with you. And when they see that email come in, they're just going to hit delete on it. They're not even going to read it. So make sure that you're not being that type of person. We talked about it in the networking panel as well, which you can see on the YouTube channel, on the Game Makers Guild YouTube channel. Just be a nice person. And we all love games, and we're all nerds to a degree, so we'll all get along. As long as you're a nice person, you're going to find some people in this industry that you're really going to click with.
To a degree, Tim.
Let's be clear, it's a Monday night and we're live streaming about my kids are upstairs destroying my house right now. There's no degrees.
So before we get to the question and answer portion, I do want to ask you all one last question. Where can we find you on the internet and on social media? Anitra and Andrew.
Any of the social media at Family Gamers AA for Andrew and Anitra, or our website is thefamilygamers.com.
Rob.
Just go to pawnsperspective.com and you will find links to everywhere that I am on the interwebs.
Okay. And Ryan.
Yeah, we are primarily YouTube. You'll find us at just Man vs. Meeple at YouTube, and you can find me, Lore Master Ryan, on Twitter, though I am far more active on Facebook and also on the Man vs. Meeple Discord. Please join us on Discord. It's a lot of fun, and we love chatting with fans.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to jump into the question and answer portion. And I'm actually going to start with one question that kind of came up. That came to me while we were talking about this. What do you do if you get something wrong with a game? If you play a rule wrong and then in your review you say, oh, this was really awful and imbalanced or overpowered because this card does this and it really didn't actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that?
Well, this happens a lot. And I would like to say there have been some bad examples in the industry of people that have gotten a rule wrong, done their review based on that wrong rule, and just committed to it and doubled down and done nothing about it. What we like to do at Man vs. Meeple, especially for doing an overview, because it's so important to get the game correct, is we will always send a video to a publisher before we post it. And this is not to say judge our content. This is to say make sure that we are doing everything correctly. We are explaining the game correctly. We got all the rules right. There are definitely some times when a designer or a publisher will send back to me even and say, okay, but like from 4 minutes to 5 minutes, why were you explaining it this way? This isn't correct. And then I might go back and reread the rules and go, oh my gosh, how did I read that wrong? Or I'll get on a call with them and we'll realize the rule is just very unclear with multiple interpretations, and that can help publishers. I think it is our job as content creators to show the game in the way it was meant to be shown and played by the publisher. And so I at least will bend over backwards to make sure that before a video goes live, that it is exactly the way the publisher intends it to be. That doesn't mean I'm going to change my score unless it was an instance where, you know, if you post a review and you're very negative and everyone comes in the comments and says, well, the thing you complained about isn't even in the rules. I don't know where you got that from. Like, you're not playing this game correctly. Maybe it's time to like post a second video or even take that one down or just address the fact that people screw up sometime. Now, if it's a live play, that's a completely different story. I know, right? All bets are off with live play. I know that when we do live plays, which we do several times a week, we really, really encourage the designer to try to be there or the publisher to try to be there because it's live. You can be there in the comments where if there's an issue, we have had people in the comments, publishers say, wait a minute, hold on. That's not quite right. And you know, and they'll talk us through how it's because some things are ambiguous. And when you're doing a live stream, the last thing you want to do is say, hold on, I don't remember exactly how that rule looks. Let me go look through the rule book for the next 5 minutes until I can, let me get on BGG and see what they're saying on BGG about this rule. Like you really can't do that. You just have to kind of decide how you're going to play it at your table and go with it. And if the publisher is there in the comments or the designer is there, they're generally really cool about it. Like, oh, here's how it actually plays. Oh, we'll fix it for the next couple rounds or whatever, right? But it is my firm belief, really, and I mentioned this earlier, but it has happened. If you play a game wrong, you shouldn't stand by your review, because the reason you disliked it so much might be because of that. You at least owe the publisher and the designer who have put so many hours into this, you owe them the chance to go back and play that game correctly. And if you still don't like it, then you still don't like it. And maybe all the things that bothered you still bother you. That's fine. At least we know as an audience that you approached it correctly. And I'm sure there's people out there that know exactly kind of some of the situations that have happened. But at Man vs. Meeple, at least we just do like to bend over backwards as much as we can to make sure that the game that comes out is exactly what you wanted it to look like.
I think you brought up a good point, Ryan, is that your audience is going to play this game and see that you played it wrong, and then what does that say about you as a reviewer and your trustworthiness, right?
Oh,
exactly,
100%. Nail you to the wall.
Jeff, you had a question in chat as well. Do you want to jump on camera and ask?
Well, I wasn't prepared for that. No, I'm having a bad hair day. No, right. Ryan, you'd mentioned something about, reviewers at charge. So, you know, some reviewers charge. Could you just give us a perspective on that?
So, yeah, I am pretty firm here in that I think that there is a line you don't cross. I will never accept money for a review. And I know that some people do, but when you do, you kind of soil that whole process for everybody. Because when you're being paid to do a review, how much is that inflecting your decisions about how you present the game? And even if it's not, everyone that watches is going to wonder, how does this reflect the opinions? That's why when we do like preview videos, it's all completely, here's the information. Here, this is not my opinion. Andrew mentioned it in the comments. There are so many other ways that we can cover a game. If you want to pay us to do content, we will. We'll do live streams. We'll talk about your game on our podcast. But I will never review a game that I got paid for. Now, some people go so far as to even say that we shouldn't even be given copies to review, because even that I think is too extreme, because, like they said, we all do this as a hobby. Like, we're not millionaires. We don't do this as out of just the goodness of our heart. Like, we do need that help. So I think that's okay, because we can get a game for free and we can tell a publisher, hey, we didn't like it, we're giving it a bad review. And if the publisher is respectable, they will say, sorry you didn't like that one, here's the next one. They usually won't say, well, then I'm never sending you another game ever, which apparently a lot of people do think that. A lot of people think when they see a good review that the only reason we're being positive is because we don't want to lose access to their games. I have never had a publisher even threaten to cut us off because we didn't have a bad review or we gave a bad review. And you know what? If they do threaten to cut us off, that's fine. I will buy, if I like the game, I will buy it myself and I will review it anyway, because that's just how we do things.
I will say that whether it was intentional or not, we have had a publisher cut us off after giving a bad review.
It shouldn't happen.
It was a large, I'm not going to name names, but it was a large mass market games and toys publisher. And you know what? First of all, that's their right. And second of all, after the experience I had with their game, I'm like, you know what? That's fine. Because again, family games. So like, I didn't have a lot of faith that future ones were going to be better. But there is, in that relationship and in, being given a free game, there is some bias there that you're not going to escape. But generally speaking, a lot of reviewers are going to say the same thing that Ryan did, of like, I'm not going to accept money for this, because even if I think it's not going to bias me, it then looks suspicious as I took money and then I made this glowing content.
You're in a lose-lose, because either you don't disclose that you got paid and someone finds out and then you get trashed on the internet, or you do disclose that you got paid, which, by the way, you should always do. And then it looks like you got paid to give a game a good review. So it really is just a bad situation that is just easier to avoid if possible.
And there are many different ways for a reviewer or a content creator to make that money. Like Ryan said, a video, any other kind of content, whether it's a preview video or a live stream or something like that. But as for a straight up review, you should never have to pay for that.
All right. So we're going to do one more question for the recording, then we'll stop it and we can, stick around if there are more questions. But there's actually, Rob, what you just said is a great kind of segue to a question that Jamie had asked earlier. And I know, Ryan, you touched upon this when you were talking. So Jamie, do you want to jump up and ask your question about reviews and previews?
All right. Hello. So thanks so much for all the great info so far. I just wanted to circle back to a question I asked. And what is the difference between a review, a preview, and an overview? Because I've heard all three of those mentioned.
So a review, in my mind, is exactly that. I am going to give you my honest opinion of a game. And to me, that is a completed, packaged game. A preview is I'm going to kind of look at a game. I used to do Kickstarter previews that were, prototypes. I might say, hey, it's kind of cool, but I'm not really going to give a solid opinion. This isn't my concrete view of this game because, like Ryan said earlier, it's not done. I'll tell you what it looks like now. I'll tell you that it's an unfinished product. I'll tell you that I played it, how it works. I'll give you a gut check on it, but it's not a review. That is not that game could come out a year later. I will then review it. I give awards out every year for games that I review. Previews are not counted in those because they're not completed. And an overview in my mind is just a completely unbiased, this is what this game is about. and that is that. Now, going back to something we mentioned earlier, where there have been times where I have not liked a game and I would give it a particularly bad review, and the designer or publisher said, well, could you just do an overview of the game? And I will happily do that, completely unbiased of my opinion. Just, this is the game, this is what it does. It's very rarely that I've had to do that, but I have done that in the past. So it all comes down to, like, completely my opinion. Here's a product that's not finished. It may be cool, it may be not. Here's what it's all about, and here's just a completely unbiased piece of content about this game. Like, this is the game. And, you know, in my mind, that's the distinction between the three.
I know that when we got started at Mad vs. Meeple, we also do a lot of Kickstarter or crowdfunding previews, and we've actually gotten away from the term preview and overview just because of the confusion. Especially when we first started, there was a lot of confusion about what was a review and what was a preview. So we've kind of stepped back and created kind of a new format where we call it, like, let's take a look. Like, let's take a look at whatever game, where we just literally open the box, we talk about everything that comes with it, we talk about the rules, and we might say this game has these mechanics from these other games that you might like, right? We want to keep that as separate as possible so that when the viewer comes in, they don't have to ask that question, because when we first started, there was so much confusion. So now it's like, we're just taking a look at this game. This is not my opinion. You probably won't even get an opinion out of the video. Of course, like, sometimes natural enthusiasm does come through. When you're giving even an unbiased preview of a game that you love, you just get really excited, and you're like, you might dwell on a few things that you really like, and that's impossible to avoid. And I think that's okay. As long as everyone's on the same page of, like, this is not a firm opinion. I'm not going to grade this game. I'm not going to score this game. It's just, you make the decision for yourself. And I've done a lot of these overviews or taken a look at a lot of games that maybe aren't for me, but a lot of people love them. And so I feel like I'm still a valuable part of this, because if I can show you how the game looks and plays, then you get to make the educated decision about whether or not you want to buy it or not.
Anitra, Andrew, do you have any thoughts on reviews, previews? I know you do lots of things. So,
I mean, my biggest thought, honestly, about this, it kind of goes back to that whole paid reviewer thing. Previews, I think there's an avenue for paying for something like that, because it is designed to be objective, right? And if it's like, that's kind of the big line, right? This whole overview preview thing, those are objective. I'm on a fact-finding mission, and I'm going to present these facts to you. Like, that's something that potentially could be paid. And I have seen many people, many content creators that will charge for a preview, but they will not charge for a review, because reviews are subjective. And when money gets involved in something that's subjective, that's where all the problems come from.
I do think it's easy to get confused between them. And that's part of why with our channel of content, everything is always going to get our opinion. Nothing is explicitly paid for.
Except our sponsorship, which we're
right.
very thankful for.
Right.
And that's not a game.
Our sponsorship is not a game. Although at one point we did have a publisher sponsor us. And so we ran ads in our podcast, we did ad reads, and we're like, this, and very clear, like, we've been paid for this ad, and yes, this is what we think of this game, but we were also paid for this ad. But in general, we've stayed away from paid board game content of any type, because it is easy to get confused, especially if you're not, like, elbow deep in the industry like we are.
I don't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with accusations of biased reviews, okay? So we pretty much, if it's a possibility, we stay away from it. But I mean, I think that this is something that Rob and Ryan really covered super well. I think, Ryan, your entire team has a lot of exposure to these different kinds of things with all the stuff you guys are doing. Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that, other than to say, like, I'm a lot less surprised to see a content creator, expecting to be paid for some kind of objective presentation of their stuff. But also, by the way, for what it's worth, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, if you think about paying for a preview, you very much, I think, have the right to say what level of quality you're getting, right? That it's a different kind of transaction at that point than a review. A review is something that you should expect to be in the context of what that content creator provides normally. As soon as those parameters change, then you're, I think, as a designer, as a publisher, going to have a little bit more say in kind of what goes on, which isn't to say that you get to strong arm them into doing whatever you want, but I think that you become, a voice at the table in that overview, preview context.
It's a different kind of contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, it's kind of a really fine line to walk. And I think we've kind of had to balance this out over the years because Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general is not what it used to be, where you could just go to there with a wing and a prayer and a piece of artwork. When it comes to board games nowadays, people expect to see a certain amount of things on your page. And if you do not have someone doing a video explaining your game, then people aren't gonna they scroll down just to watch those videos and get to see how the game is played because that's important to them. And bringing in a bunch of different creators that have different tastes and different styles of presenting information is good. But on our end, that's a lot of time and effort. And just comping us a game isn't necessarily going to benefit the amount of time that we spend researching these games, polishing these games, because like I said earlier, we want to go bend over backwards to make sure that this preview or overview is exact. And I think that content creators should be paid for that work because it is a lot of hours to do that. But we're doing it for your benefit as a marketing tool. And I think it's very, very important to look at it as a piece of marketing or almost like a commercial, as opposed to actual just review content or even a live play or anything like that. This is the attempt here is to not just to make the game look good, but to show the game in whatever its glory is, to show the components the way they should look, to show the game board as good as it looks. And I think that's a really important service, and gamers in the industry, or especially when it comes to crowdfunding, expect that. And I know that can put a little bit of a burden on new creators because maybe you don't have the budget for that, but it is something when you think about marketing, you should definitely think about that being one of your marketing expenses.
Great. Well, I'm going to stop the recording before Chris has my head for all of this that he's going to be editing later on. But Anitra, Andrew, Ryan, Rob, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with us. You know that we here at GMG love you. At least you know that I love all of you. And we are so happy to have you here and for everything that you do for the gaming industry. Thank you so much. And to everyone out there who's watching, have a great night. Make sure you check out some of our other videos on the YouTube channel as well. And I hope that you found this to be really useful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.